The purpose of the view is to generate the output for the user. So within the context of a web application, that's typically HTML, although really anything that can be rendered within the browser could be generated by the view. That would be images, PDF documents, and anything like that. Well, in ASP.NET MVC, we have two built-in view engines. They are primarily for outputting text. So first of all, HTML, but you can also output XML, JSON, anything text-based. Although, as far as JSON is concerned, there's a better way of generating JSON, and we will talk about that in another lesson. But of these two view engines, we are going to work with only one, because frankly, it's really the only one worth working with, and that's the Razor View Engine. It's the newer of the two, and it's just a lot easier and a lot nicer to work with. The older is the ASPX view engine, which is essentially angle bracket hell. In order to get in and out of C# and HTML, you have to use special elements. So the Razor view engine does not have that, and it's just almost seamless. But before we get into our view, let's start inside of our products controller and this index action method. Let's first of all change the return type. We don't want to return a string. Instead, we want to return an action result. This action result data type represents the result of executing an action method. And we have a lot of action results. We have a view result, which is what we are going to be working with. The view result is the result of executing the view, which is essentially what we are going to be doing, because instead of returning a string, we are going to call a helper method called view. And this method is inherited from the controller class. So this is just one of those things that's baked in that we can use whenever we need to. Okay, so we have an index action method that returns an action result. Let's change that to action result. The only reason is because if we ever decide to return some other type of result, that's one less thing that we have to change. And it is going to return this view. So whenever we call this view, it's going to look for the associated view with this index action method. So if you'll remember, whenever we talked about the structure of an MVC project, we have this views folder inside of the Solution Explorer. And right now we have a foo folder and then a products. So since this is the products controller and this is the index action method, and we simply called view without passing anything to the method, it's going to look for the index action or the index view inside of the products folder inside of the views folder. So if we run this, we're going to actually end up with an error because it cannot find the view for this action. So if we go to /products, we have an error. And this is very descriptive as to what the problem is. It basically says that it cannot find the view for the index, and then it tells you where it has looked. It looks inside of views and then products, and it's looking for ASPX, which is that ASPX engine, the same thing for ASCX, but it's very complete because it then looks at the shared folder. It doesn't find it there, so then it starts looking for CS HTML files. That's for the Razor View engine. It looks inside of products, doesn't find it. It looks inside of shared, it doesn't find it again. So that's why we get this error. So it's looking in all of these places for the index view. Well, let's go ahead and let's add a view now. So we can do that very easily by right-clicking on the action method, going to add view, and then we get this add view dialog box. Now by convention, the view name should match the action name. So this is the index action. The view name is going to be index, and there are some templates that we could choose from, but we're going to use the empty without a model because we don't have a model. And the model is just the data that's being passed from the controller to the view to display to the user. So this is empty without a model. We can create what's called a partial view, which is something we will talk about in another lesson. The same for a layout page. Let's make sure that all of these are unchecked, and let's just click on add. That's going to create an index.cshtml file inside of the products folder inside of our views folder. And this is just a normal HTML document, except for this code block at the top. But for right now, let's just leave that alone. Let's add some text to this div element. So let's just say that this is the index view on the products controller. So whenever we run this now and we go to products, we are going to see that within the browser. And there it is. But you can see that the URL is automatically products/index. The reason being because we were looking at the index view for our products controller. But we don't need /index. We can just do products and we get the same result. So if we look at the source, we have our HTML document, and now we have some JavaScript that was automatically injected. This is from Visual Studio's new feature called Browser Link. This is really a cool thing, and let's just look a little bit at it. Let me dock these things on the opposite side of the screen so that you can see what we have. Over on the right-hand side is the browser, and of course on the left side is Visual Studio. So down at the bottom of the browser, you can see that we have this new little toolbar, and this is from Visual Studio's Browser Link. If we click on Design, this is going to allow us to modify the document, or the view rather, from inside of the browser. And you can see on the left-hand side, whenever I move the mouse, whatever is selected corresponds to wherever my mouse is on the browser. So right now I am inside of that div element, so I can just click here, and then I can modify the contents of this div element from inside of the browser, and it's going to automatically update what we see inside of Visual Studio. So we can say that this was modified inside of the browser, and for some reason we have a lot of non-breaking spaces, so we can get rid of those. And there we have it. And we can press escape to get out of this design mode. And then let's modify this once again. Let's get rid of this text. And let's say that this was modified inside of VS. And up here we have this refresh button. This is Browser Link, and you can see that we have one browser connected. Now, Browser Link isn't specific to Internet Explorer. I can fire up Chrome. In fact, let me do that. Let's copy this URL, and we will go there inside of Chrome. Now, if we look at Browser Link, it says that we have two browsers connected. We have Internet Explorer and Chrome, and we can do the same thing. Although I'm not getting the script bar down at the bottom. There we go. If we click on Design, then we can say that, okay, this is going to be edited from inside of Chrome. So this was edited in Chrome. Let's press Escape to get out of design mode, and let's go back to Internet Explorer. Now, Internet Explorer did not automatically update, but we can go inside of Visual Studio and we can click on this refresh button, and this will refresh all of the browsers that are connected through this browser link. So if I click that, we can see that Internet Explorer refresh to say that this was edited in Chrome. And of course, we still see that inside of Chrome because we edit it inside of Chrome. But let's change this back to this was edited in VS. And then we will refresh the browser. We see that Chrome was refreshed and Internet Explorer was refreshed. So the folks at Microsoft did a lot of work with this latest version, or this latest update to Visual Studio 2013, and that's just one of the very nice things that we can do. In order to do that, though, you do have to have the Web Essentials plugin installed, and that's very easily done. You just go to Tools, and then you want to go to Extensions and Updates, and then you just want to do a search for Web Essentials, although you do need to select Online. And then, well, it's right there, Web Essentials 2013 for Update 2, and I have an update, and it's not for that. Okay, so enough of that, because I don't want to spend all of our time at Browser Link, but you will definitely want the Web Essentials plugin, so do download that and install that within Visual Studio. Now, we're not going to work with any real data within this lesson. Instead, we're going to look at the basics of the Razor syntax, because it is a little bit different from other technologies. It's even different from other forms of ASP.NET. So here at the top of the document, you see that we have this @ sign followed by a pair of curly braces. This is a code block, and C# code can live inside of here. And in fact, you can switch between C# code and HTML, and I will show you an example of that in a minute. But let's first of all create a variable. I'm going to call it name, and I'll just assign it my name. And let's say that this is some real data that we have that we want to display within the document. So let's add an H1 element, and let's just add hello, comma, space, and then we want to display that name. Well, we can use what's called a Razor expression. It starts with an @ sign, and then it's just the variable name. So at and then name. And that is going to take that value and put it right there where at name is. So if we run this, we are going to see hello Jeremy inside of the browser, although we need to go to products and not /index. And there we have hello Jeremy, and of course we have this was edited in VS. Let's get rid of that because we want to do something else other than that. Let's say that we want to output a list of things, an unordered list. So let's add a UL element, and we need something to output. So let's use a for each loop. So I'm going to use the @ sign once again to switch us into C# mode. And let's output the individual characters of a string. So var character in, and let's just say hello space razor. And then we want to use an li element. Now this is a C# code block, so I can write C# inside of here. So we could do var hello equals character and so on and so forth, and there are no syntax errors here. But the beauty about the Razor engine is that we can also just seamlessly shift into HTML as well. So we can just go straight into our list item element, and then we want to output the value of our character. So we use the @ sign once again, and then character. We have to specify the @ sign here because otherwise it's going to think that this is the literal character string, and that would be outputted for each one of the characters inside of our hello razor string. So we need @character, and if we go back to the browser, we are going to see, first of all, hello and then my name, and then we will see an unordered list where each item is a character within the hello space razor string. Now, one of the wonderful things about these razor expressions is that it outputs HTML encoded data. So if we have some HTML inside of the value of the name variable, it's going to automatically encode that. So let's change this h1 element to a paragraph, and let's add some HTML to the value that we are assigning to name. Let's just make my name bolded. So we will add the opening and closing B tags. Let's go back to the browser, and instead of seeing hello and then Jeremy being bolded, we see the literal values of the angle bracket B, closing angle bracket, and so on and so forth. And so this gives us some automatic protection, or at least a layer of protection against script injection. Now, of course, there's other pieces involved with protecting ourselves from script injection, but still, this is a very nice feature. But of course, a lot of times you actually want to output HTML. You don't want to HTML encode something. So instead of just using @ sign followed by the name, we have what's called an HTML helper. This is an HTML class, or the class is called HTML helper, but the property that we use is HTML, and this has a method called raw, and this is going to output the raw HTML. So we simply just pass in name, and then that's going to write the actual HTML into the document. So now, whenever we refresh, we see that Jeremy is now bolded. Now, when I said HTML is a property, I did not misspeak. This HTML is a property on the class that is created whenever we create a CS_HTML file. So right now we have index.cshtml that created a new class that inherits from a class specified within the web config file. So let's open that file. It's inside of the views folder, and here we have an element called system.web.webpages.razor, and everything inside of this element are settings for the Razor View Engine. One of those is this pages element. It has a page-based type attribute, and it is set to system.web.mvc.webViewPage. This is the base class for all of our view pages. So anytime we create a CS_HTML file, it is inheriting this webViewPage class, and this is where you will find that HTML property. And you can change this value if you wanted to. If you wanted to write your own base class and use it for your view pages, all you have to do is change this setting. Now you can also see that there is this namespaces attribute, and then there are some namespaces. These are essentially using statements. These are automatically imported inside of your CS_HTML files so that you don't have to use the fully qualified class name inside of these namespaces. And you can also add a using statement. So if you didn't need to add a namespace here, which you can do, you just need to add another add element and specify the namespace attribute. You can use at and then using and then whatever namespace that you want to import. And the last thing that I want to talk about in this lesson is the @ sign itself. Now, it's relatively obscure, but sometimes we want to use the @ sign inside of our content. And Razor is sometimes smart enough to recognize when the @ sign isn't switching into C# mode. Like, for example, if we have an email address, Razor will automatically know that this @ sign is not trying to switch into C# mode. It sees that there's something before the @ sign and then something after the @ sign. But of course, if we omit whatever's before the @ sign, then the Razor View Engine is going to think that we are trying to grab a value of ASDF and use a property called COM, and that of course is not going to work. But if you ever find yourself needing to use an @ sign at the beginning of a word or at the end of the word, you can escape it with simply @, and that is going to work for you. And it works in attribute values as well. Well, that's it for this lesson. I wanted to introduce you to views and the Razor View Engine. In the next lesson, we are going to look at two more features of the Razor View Engine: layout pages and partial views. They are wonderful ways that we can reuse markup.